Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today we are going to be exploring the question of inspiration. This is a word that gets thrown around a lot. People talk about being inspired. People talk about inspiring people. Great leaders in their field who excel. It was recently, I saw a clip from the Joe Rogan Experience, and they were talking about individuals who are top performers in whatever chosen field they have decided to be the best at. And they were, of course, talking about MMA and boxing and football, basketball, because that's nowadays the most readily available silo, the most readily available career that we all have access to in terms of seeing top performers. Sports is that area where individuals are constantly being measured because they are constantly being tested against one another, against world records, and against their past performance. And so sports is one of those areas where you see many individuals who have this drive to excel, to be the best, to be number one in the world. For example, world record holders, Olympians, and what have you. And Joe Rogan and his guest were talking about how it can be very inspiring to see these people excel at what they do. Actually, now come to think of it, his guests were Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. They're promoting a new film of theirs called RIP, R-I-P. It's a police procedural thriller type, action type movie, and it's the first time that they've been on screen in a long time together. And so they were doing the rounds, and they were on Joe Rogan's, and they were talking about how inspiring it is to them to witness performances, and that includes artistic performances, but also directorial performances and sports performances and performances of all kinds, where you get to witness somebody being the best, certainly the best that they can be, but also the best in the world, the very best at what they do, and how that inspires us to be better, to do more, to try harder. So that's another use of the word inspire. The question is, do we live daily from a place of inspiration? Because the word inspire literally means to be in spirit. And that could mean many things to many people. What does it mean to be in spirit, to live in spirit? You will hear everything from believing in my Lord and my God, believing in Jesus, believing in Muhammad, believing in, whatever deity, to living your life as a good person, again, trying to be the best person you can be, trying to treat others with equanimity, respect, I dare say love, if not just general altruism, trying to be fair and forthright and respectful and to honor others and their lives. Surely that comes into play. But the relationship between a state of being in spirit and being inspired is one that very often we shy away from. And the reason we shy away from it is because it is very difficult to be inspired all the time. Even if you are trying to be kind to others and respectful and mindful of yourself and others and your relationship to them and how you treat them and how you respond versus react mechanically to them. So you're trying to be your best self, the best expression of your soul, of your being that you can be. And that's very much in our purview. That's in our keeping because we have free will, right? Kindness, compassion, respect for others is not foisted upon us. We are not forced to behave that way. If we were, the world would be a very different place. But it is what it is. And many, many, many people do not concern themselves moment by moment, day in and day out, let alone moment by moment, with living in spirit, being in spirit. They're concerned with what they have to do. And when they're not concerned with what they have to do, i.e., what they need to do, then they switch their attention to what they want to do or what they don't want to do. For the vast majority of people, even if questioned, asked about living in spirit, they can give you a very quick, trite answer. Oh, yes, I live in spirit. I believe in Jesus. And I live by the 10 Commandments. And and so they can rationalize how the choices that they make day in and day out, moment to moment, is living in spirit. But for the vast majority of people, they never ask or care if they are being inspired, if they are living an inspired life, even if they are living in spirit. But the two are inseparable. Because if you are concerning yourself moment by moment, day in and day out, with what you need and what you want, you're concerning yourself with survival and with desire. And those are, again, very much in the purview of you, the mortal being, the mortal vessel. And so you might be treating people with respect. You might be treating people with kindness. And you're a good person. And you're following, I suppose, something akin to the Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm. And insofar as you can have a worldview and a belief system, religious or otherwise, that gives you a moral compass and a sense of ethics around which you organize your day-to-day activities, those activities still are focused on you, the mortal vessel, on what you need and what you want. And you are able to go through life, the vast majority of people that is, without requiring any inspiration, and still regard yourself as being a spiritual person or a religious person or a kind, benevolent person. But for those of us on the path, a life like that just doesn't cut it. And for genuine creatives and high achievers, artists of all kind, but professionals of all kind, individuals who feel deep down at the very core of their being that they are here for a reason, that they have some purpose. Inspiration is our lifeblood. It is our oxygen, because we recognize, we know that inspiration is our connection to spirit. To be inspired is the metaphysical mechanism that is associated with what we would call our calling. To be called to serve, to be called to rise, to be called to take on some great project or endeavor or service or sacrifice or whatever. But no doubt, while at times you have felt very inspired in your life, very connected to spirit, to your higher self, to your being, or to God, or however you process this in your mind at the time. And you were inspired to paint or to create music or to pursue a particular vocation, a particular career, or you were inspired to drop out of school and pursue something else, or you were inspired to travel the world or go backpacking, across the continent. Whatever the case may be, there have been times and moments in your life. If you're here watching this now, there have been times in your life when you have felt the pull, the calling, and that pull, that call within you became this drive, this North Star guiding you, as the star of Bethlehem guided the three wise men to the manger and the nativity. That nativity of Christ, right? That's when the Son of God, the Christ, is born into the world. But the wise men, in order to find the Christ as it comes into the world and to bring him their gifts, they have to follow the star. They need guidance, and it's celestial guidance. It's guidance from heaven. And as I've explained in the past, those three wise men are representative of our three brains, the three brains of the human machine: our intellectual center, our emotional center, and our motor instinctive sexual center. That is heart, mind, body. And they are wise because they follow experience. They are wise in years. They are wise in experience and self-evident experiential knowledge. That is what they seek, and that is why they seek the Christ, the Son of God. To bring their gifts to him, to serve him. And their gifts are the gift of the intellect, the gift of emotional intelligence, and the gifts of the motor instinctive sexual center, the gift of the body. These are the gifts of the human machine. These are the faculties of the mortal vehicle, the mortal vessel. But in order for these gifts, these faculties, to be put in service of the newborn Christ as it enters into the world, these three wise men of ours, these three brains of ours, intellect, heart, and body, we require guidance. We need to be able to follow. And to be inspired is to follow the guidance of the North Star. To have that compass within us that guides us on our path. That path always leads to our own innermost intimate Christ. And the guidance is inspiration. We are inspired to leave the comfort and security of our homeland, of the world that we know, just as the three wise men did. They left their lands, and they packed up their belongings of greatest value, and they followed the star. And again, there have been times in your life where you have felt this way, that you are on a quest, on a journey, on a mission. And whether that was as elaborate as backpacking across the continent, or traveling around the world, or undertaking some great literary work or artistic endeavor or musical adventure, or vocational undertaking, where you throw yourself into a craft, into a trade, into research, into study, into an experiment, into invention, into creation, into fatherhood, into motherhood. Inspiration can come in any form. And the focus, the object of our inspiration, can take on any endeavor, any enterprise of the human condition. You can see individuals excelling at the most outrageous unimaginable, inconceivable tasks, hobbies, right? Pastimes, but they take it to such a high level where they can only be seen and judged and deemed as now professionals of that field, of that area. For instance, Lego builders. You're familiar with Lego. It's a toy. And yet, there is an official designation that is granted to adults who still play with Lego. They can receive the designation of master builder. And they receive this designation from the Lego company based on the things that they have built with Lego kits. And they go to conventions and they go to competitions. And they photograph and they document and they videotape some of their creations, and these creations are just phenomenal. You have to stand in awe of the creativity, the imagination, but the time, the care, the attention to detail, and the effort and energy that these individuals put into their playing with Lego. But some of these creations, you can only, who are we to judge, right? Like, who are we to say that that's just some frivolous pastime? Who are we to say that these individuals were not genuinely inspired to rank among the top 10 or 20 or 100 master builders of Lego in the world? Because their creations do give joy, and their creations do inspire others, and inspire young people, inspire children to work with their hands, and to use this toy that I too played with when I was a child, and I still to this day admire as one of the most imagination stimulating toy that anyone has ever created, precisely because you can make anything. As long as you have the pieces and the imagination, the sky is the limit. And imagination is a quality of consciousness, a faculty of consciousness. So if master builders and their incredible creations inspire generations of young people to use their imagination instead of just blindly consuming whatever is on the screen in front of them, but actually get down on their hands and knees on the ground, dump out a bucket of Lego, and start searching for the pieces that they need to build whatever is in their mind's eye that they see in their imagination that they want to create. You see, there's a beautiful analogy there. There's a beautiful metaphor in there. And how that imagination comes into being through our effort, through our sacrifice, and through our mindfulness. We have to observe, we have to find those pieces. We have to see in our mind's eye what we want to create, and then we have to find the pieces that are going to fit in that particular spot, in this particular step of the process. And when we were children, we used to do this all the time. We used to play all the time, and imagination almost came naturally to us. And of course, as children, we were afforded that time and that space, and that was an appropriate use of our energy to play, to make use of our imagination, to create. And some people did it with markers and crayons and pencil crayons. and others did it with Lego and blocks, and others did it with music, or when you went to the beach, or I actually had a sandbox in my backyard, so I could make sand castles and things out of sand all the time. I didn't have to wait until summertime when we went to the beach to make sand castles or what have you. I had a sandbox in the backyard. It was one of the less expensive uh, uh, toys that my immigrant parents could afford. Few bags of sand and a few 2x6s made into a box, and you have a sandbox, right? So it can be that, and it can be woodworking, pottery, needlework, right? If you like to knit and you're inspired to knit someone a sweater for their birthday or for Christmas, and you go and you make a whole enterprise of buying the yarn and finding the perfect pattern, and right, and this can be a whole enterprise, but something inside of you moves you to undertake this work, to remodel a bathroom, or to help a friend remodel their kitchen, or anything. Inspiration can come at any time for any number of reasons. It doesn't have to be some lofty life's work. It can be being inspired to make Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner for your family and friends. And you can be inspired to do something special, something different, something unique, something maybe you've never done before or something they've never had before. And this is not going to go down in the annals of history. You're not doing this for attention or fame or fortune or anything of the like. That's another key to inspiration. And where the term art for art's sake has its true origin. As I've said many times, our Father who art in heaven, art for art's sake, is the artist who feels that inspiration to birth the Christ, so that the essence, that Christic essence, can express as our Father who art in heaven. That Christ is born here on earth through art, but that art can be that the arts spans a great spectrum, including, as I mentioned, culinary arts. And we, the wise men, seek to find that perfection, that Christic perfection, that essence, that seed, a drop that comes down from above and is born into the world by virtue of our gifts, our faculties that we give to that Christic essence, that drop of spirit within us that moves us, that guides us to see the Christ born in this world. You see, this is all what it means to be inspired, so that we art here below as our Father who art in heaven. And anyone on the path feels this longing, this need, this that when you are called to the work, when you are called to the path, and when you awaken to this comprehension, this knowledge, this experiential knowing that I am just a vehicle, I am just a vessel, and that I am awaiting inspiration, I'm awaiting guidance in order to know what to do and how to do it. This is oxygen to those of us on the path. This is the guiding light of our lives. But I hazard to assume that just as you have had moments in your life when that guiding star was shining bright in your night sky, clear as day, illuminating the path in front of you, when every step was crystal clear and you strode boldly ahead into the darkness because of the guiding light of inspiration in your life, and when you completely surrendered to the guidance along that path in those times, in those moments, magic happened. And people and circumstances came together, the synergies, the serendipities, the synchronicities. It was all surreal. But just as you have had those moments and those times, those periods in your life, I hazard to guess and make this bold assumption that you have also experienced times when you were lost in the desert, like the Israelites, wandering for what felt like 40 years, where before, when you looked up into the dark night sky of the desert, was this guiding light. Now nothing. No inspiration, no guidance, no moral compass. It's just silence. The eerie, echoing emptiness of a blackness, a void. And if you have experienced the former, that is, once you know what it's like to be inspired, when everything is clicking and you completely surrender to the light guiding you through the darkness, once you've experienced that, to shift back into a place where mum's the word, and try as you might, you get no clear indication, no clear path. This can be very, very difficult, very challenging. And most likely, you know what this is, you know what it's like. And you can pray, you can meditate, you can ask, you can beg, and you get nothing. Not only do you not get any clear guidance or inspiration, but you you don't even get an explanation as to why not. You don't even get a message as like, don't worry, it's on its way. Just sit tight and relax. You haven't been forgotten. You haven't been forsaken. You don't even get a message like that. So naturally, it's one of the places your mind goes. Have I been abandoned? Have I been forsaken? And the gremlins of our shadow self and our animal nature, our mechanical animal egos start to creep in because they sense the opportunity. They are opportunists, and they pounce on weakness. And where they very often they change their tune when we are walking in the light of inspiration. The egos bide their time. They're regrouping, and they're changing tact. They're changing their costume. They're changing their strategy. And I can get into more of that later. But when we're uninspired, we're lacking the intuition, when we're in the darkness and there is no guiding light, well then, the egos of fear and of pride, in the guise of shame, and fear in the guise of abandonment, they start to whisper all sorts of conspiratorial ideas in our heart and in our mind and in our body. We start feeling even anxiety because that oxygen of which I spoke earlier, it's gone. So we might feel ourselves spiritually choking or artistically choking. If you are a writer and you have experienced what all writers go through at some point, writer's block. And you can sit in front of a keyboard or in front of a notepad with a pen, and it doesn't matter what you do or try to do or how hard or nothing comes. It's like your well has dried up inside of you. Right? The stream of creativity has it's just a dry riverbed now. And then fear comes. Is that it? Have I run out of ideas? Did my imagination run out? And if you come at it from a spiritual perspective, then you're asking a question: have I been abandoned? Have I been forsaken? Did I do something wrong? Have I angered God? Have I somehow proved myself unworthy? Or did I do God a dirty somehow? Did I do him dirty somehow with did I take my creative gift for granted? Or did I abuse it? Or did I not create what was intended? Did I fail? Am I a failure? Am I a nobody? I mean, there's no limit to the thoughts and the self-loathing and the beating ourselves up and the shame, the guilt, the anxiety that can come when we're wandering in the desert, all alone in the dark. And that source of inspiration, which we know very well that we used to have, has now apparently abandoned us. These are very dark times indeed for those who experience this. And we all experience some version of what I'm describing. And there's a reason for that. That reason doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to us mortals, because it's very hard for us to comprehend it, one, and secondly, to accept, because we can't help it. We can't help ourselves. Those of us who are here to serve, those of us who are here to create, or here to give, or here to convey, or whatever, we get that high achieving impulse from within. And once we're bitten, if you will, by that bug, it doesn't let us go. We can't let it go. We're like a pit bull with a tire, right? Relentless. And that, at times, that's passion and that intensity, that determinism can serve us and can be a positive aspect. But when we're not intended to be creating, when we are wandering in the desert, and our being, our source of inspiration, is not feeding us with guidance and with that same spark, that same drive, then that determinism and that passion very easily gets co-opted by our egos and gets turned against us. And those feelings of abandonment and those feelings of self-doubt and self-deprecation and etc., like, what you go through when you're not being inspired. And it just follows that if you're not in spirit, what are you in? And the answer is, generally speaking, when you're not in spirit, the egos are going to want to make sure that you're in hell, that you're suffering. And that's what being lost in the desert is. It's lost in the desert in the Bible as an allegory. It's limbo. It's purgatory. It's the first levels of hell. Listless, rudderless, right? Just, again, lost in the desert. There's no real further explanation required. You're lost in a place that's lifeless, that's cold, because deserts get very cold at night. So this is all well and good, describing the problem or describing the circumstances, describing the situation. So the question is, what do we do? What can we do when we're uninspired? What are we supposed to do? And it's not enough to say, well, just be. Well, you're not getting anything from your being. You're cut off from your being, or it feels that way. So what do you be? You be not being? Like, how do you do that? And this is what brings us to you may be familiar with this Buddhist adage. Um, whoops. Before enlightenment, right? Chop wood. Let's get a okay. And carry water. Do you guys see that okay? Maybe I should make myself smaller so you guys can see that. It's I've got to get a better whiteboard program here because I'm using it on a very high res monitor, and none of my markers, uh, doesn't matter how thick I make them, they still come out too thin on the live stream. But hopefully that's thick enough that you guys can at least see that. So there's a Buddhist adage: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And interestingly enough, now here we're going to equate the term enlightenment with being awake. That is, having the capacity to be inspired. So the implication here is that at some time in your life, you weren't inspired, and you had never really experienced that. You didn't know what that was like. You weren't awake. You didn't have that connection to your being. So what did you do? Well, you chopped wood and you carried water. In other words, you did your chores. You did what you had to do. You did what you needed to live, to survive. You did what other people do. You just normal, mundane things, right? That's what chop wood, carry water suggests. But if you're familiar with this adage, you know that there's a second part. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. What does this mean? Practically speaking, it's a very clever Buddhist Zen saying. It's a very wise saying. But what does it really mean? At the outset of today's live stream, I mentioned that most people go through their lives never thinking about inspiration. It never even crosses their mind. They just do what they need to do. They do what they have to do. And they do what they want to do. And that's it. And that's life for them. Is that not chop wood, carry water? Because they're certainly not even seeking enlightenment, let alone attaining it. So clearly, they're all before enlightenment. They're not awake. They're going through the motions, but they're going through the motions of a life that they want or that they feel they can, that they, they're making the best of what they've been handed, let's say. They're doing their best. And nobody can be expected to do more than their best. Nobody can be expected to live life at any other level than the level that they are at. So naturally, there's a simple self-evident truth that if someone's not enlightened, someone is not awake, someone is not plugged into the source of inspiration, then they're not inspired. And they're not called to be inspired. So they live a very regular, normal, mundane life. They chop wood, they carry water. And at some point, all of us, to one degree or another, have gone through periods of our life when we chopped wood and we carried water. But then what do we make of the second part? After enlightenment. Because surely after enlightenment, that's it. You are awake. You have at least moments of clarity, a more conscious appreciation and knowledge of who you are in the scheme of things. That is, you are a mortal vessel. And that after enlightenment, you have gone through periods of inspiration when you were completely surrendered to the guidance of your inner North Star, guiding you through the darkness, whereby with each step you stepped boldly forth toward your destiny on a mission to bring your gifts, the gifts of the three wise men, to the newborn Christ, and to worship the newborn Christ by virtue of taking this journey, undertaking this mission, and delivering those gifts. So what's this chop wood, carry water business? Because that mission, that great undertaking, whatever it is that you've undertaken, whatever it is that you've been inspired to do, is not going to be the same as what you were doing before you were inspired. So what are the Zen masters, what are the Buddhists getting at here? And the answer, of course, comes in your experience of being uninspired. When you are awake, for lack of a better term, you are enlightened to one degree or another. You do know your higher self. You have been inspired. You know what that's like. But now you're lost in the desert. No intuition, no imagination, no creativity, no North Star in the dark night. Either it's the void of complete blackness, or there's a billion stars up there and none of them jump out at you. They're all shining just as bright. Any one of them could be the star you're supposed to follow. But how do you decide? How can you tell? Which way do you go? There's a billion stars up there. Right? That's another form that being uninspired can take. The illusion of choice, too much choice, too many options. And then trying to discern which option is best using nothing but our mortal faculties, we end up in something called analysis paralysis. We don't know what to do. And if you've watched Netflix or any of these content platforms, you know what it's like trying to find something to watch. They call it doom scrolling, where you set aside 2 hours to watch something and you spend 90 minutes of that 2 hours just scrolling through the endless list of possibilities, not knowing what to watch, not knowing what to choose, because it's all just content, right? It's all very uninspired. And because it's uninspired, it's very uninspiring. So what do? You chop wood, you carry water. Okay, but what does that mean? Does that mean you go back to living like you were before when you were asleep? Does that mean you regress back to when you were just doing what you needed to do and doing what you wanted to do? When you were living completely uninspired? Well, you're uninspired now. As I've described in the past, there are different levels of comprehension, of interpretation. And that no one can understand, let alone interpret, at any level other than where they are at. So before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water is what it sounds like. Do your chores. Do what needs to be done. And what else are you going to do before enlightenment, before awakening, before you are gripped by inspiration, before you hear the call? What else can you do but that which must be done? So do it. But after enlightenment, after awakening, you should now have access to faculties that you didn't have access to before enlightenment. So let me ask you, what do you do? Why do you chop wood? Why would you chop wood? What is it about wood Why do we chop it? Use your imagination here. Use your experience. Why do you chop wood? When have you chopped wood? Maybe is a better question. I mean, unless you're a lumberjack, when and why do you chop wood? It's not a trick question. The wood that most people, certainly here in Canada and Northern Europe and other climates where it tends to get cold, but even in warmer climates at nighttime, like that aforementioned desert, it gets cold in the desert at night. Why would you need to chop wood? Most of the wood that people chop is firewood. And you break up the wood, you chop it into smaller pieces so that it will burn. Okay. What about carry water? Why would you carry water? For what purpose? And perhaps more practically speaking, how do you carry water? How do you carry water? I mean, why you would carry water? Water is essential for life, for drinking, for cooking, for washing. But how do you carry water? Do you carry it in your hands? Probably, if you were to carry water, you would do so in a vessel of some kind. Typically, whether it's a bucket or some kind of a larger vase or whatever, you have a vessel, you have something that's sealed, at least on the bottom, that prevents the water from spilling. You carry water, you hold water in that vessel. Both of these are symbols. Chop wood and carry water. Remember at the very beginning, I mentioned how being inspired is connected to being in spirit, and how even those people who aren't necessarily inspired can say they are in spirit because they are treating others with respect and dignity and kindness. They're trying to be good people. They're trying to be the best people that they can be, right? So they are in spirit, even though they're not inspired. And yes, they're not enlightened and that they chop wood and they carry water. But those who are enlightened have to take it to the next level. And although we might not be inspired, we still need to be in spirit. And what do we know about being in spirit at our level? The level of the Alm of life, the level of revolutionary psychology. We need to be in observation of ourselves. We need to be in observation of our egos. And we need to be preserving our precious sexual energy, our sexual waters. And we need those sexual waters, not least because of the fire that is in those waters. And what is it that needs to burn if not our egos? That those elements which want to pull us out of being in spirit, to pull us out of spirit and into hell. So when we comprehend our egos in meditation, when we observe ourselves and comprehend our many egos in meditation, we are able to incinerate them. Our Divine Mother Kundalini can light them on fire, but only if we have focused in and comprehended the specific psychological aggregate, the specific ego that we're trying to eliminate. In other words, we need to chop wood. We need to take that false self, that I, and we need to chop it up into the little individual aggregates that create the amalgamation of the false self. But there's shame, lust, pride, fear, gluttony, etc. So you want to chop it into firewood, and once it's chopped into firewood, it can be incinerated, it can be turned to ash, it can be turned to dust. That's why you chop wood, to light a fire, to make a bonfire, to burn that wood in the fires of our Divine Mother, Kundalini. But of course, those fires are in the waters, our sexual waters. So we cannot hope to incinerate our egos. There's no point in chopping the wood if we do not also carry water, because the fires come from those waters, our sexual waters. We must master our sexual waters. We must be able to carry them. We must be a vessel that is hermetically sealed so that we can carry that water without it spilling. All throughout Scripture, we see great prophets, messengers, and avatars who are masters of their water. Moses parts the Red Sea, and Jesus famously walks on water. He also turns water into wine in the vessels at the wedding of Canaan. But he also walks on water. So, carry water as above, so below. When we carry water, the water carries us. Because that is literally what is happening when Jesus walks on water. The water that he carries him, carries his weight, the very weight of the burden of his mission. The water carries Christ, but only because the Christ carries water. Jesus, the man, carried his water, and he also chopped wood. he went into the desert and he faced Satan. He faced his demons. He faced his egos. Because the other great application of the analogy of wood is that Jesus also carried wood, because he was nailed to two pieces of wood. Those are two pinnacle moments in the life of Christ. When Christ walked on water and when Christ carried his cross. Because the other thing about chopping wood is that it's no good chopping wood and leaving the wood there. You have to carry the wood as well. The wood that you have chopped. The cross, you must bear your cross. And to die upon your cross is to have that part of you that is identified and attached to that wood to incinerate, to die, to go into hell, to face the fires that consume that wood that you have chopped and that wood that you have carried. But you've carried that wood in order so that it may be burned, so that you may be liberated. In the same way that Jesus dies on the cross as an act of liberation. In order for him to be resurrected and to be born again, to be born of the waters and the Spirit. And there's that word again, Spirit. To be born in spirit. To chop wood and to carry water. Such that the water can carry us and such that we can be free of the wood by virtue of the fire. Then we too can rise from the dead. And all of that process is what it takes to be born of the waters and the Spirit. To be in spirit. So there is work to be done. And that work is on ourselves. But as we all know, it is very challenging at times to work on ourselves, to do the work. Because many of us are impatient and we'd rather be doing our life's work. We'd rather be on a great mission or on a great journey or making great art and being proactive and being productive and feeling in the zone and being inspired, because what comes with that state of being, the endorphins are flowing, I mean, it's just the dopamine, serotonin, all the feel good molecules are just flowing inside of us. We have high energy. We just can do no wrong. Everything's positive. Everything is synchronicity. Everything is serendipity. And we're just in the middle of our own little universe, and the whole of our lives are revolving around us and in support of us in the accomplishment, the achievement of our inspired task, whatever it may be, for however long that it lasts. And so naturally, we are drawn to that. And we like that. We love that. And we want more of that. But the universe is nothing if it is not a phenomenon of ebb and flow. We like the flow part. We love the flow. And how many times do you hear people talking about flow state and getting into the flow state and achieving the flow state and finding the flow state? And right? And there's people doing all kinds of techniques and exercises and to put themselves in the flow state. But what if, I mean, can you turn on a tap and just leave it on all the time forever? You really well and truly always all the time be in this so-called flow state? Does that make sense? Can you be awake 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of your life? Or is there a time to ebb? Ebb and flow. What goes up must come down. Breathe in, breathe out. You can't just breathe in. It's the universe doesn't work that way. Nothing works that way. Where you can just breathe in and breathe in and breathe in, breathe. That's called hyperventilating. Your lungs will burst. Everything you can't do that. There needs to be downtime. There needs to be time when you chop wood, carry water, you rest, rejuvenate, or when you regroup, recharge. If you've completed some great mission, some great projects, some great work that you were inspired to do, great. But now, in accordance with the Alm of Life, you got to go back down into hell. You got to descend to the next deeper level of hell. And what are you going to do there? You're going to face your demons. You're going to face even harder versions of your demons, stronger adversaries. And you're going to be in parts of the dungeon where you've never been before. Or you're going to be experiencing the same part of the dungeon, but at a deeper, more challenging level that you've never been before. And you will feel lost. And you will feel forsaken, and you will feel abandoned. Why? Because there's no inspiration down there. You're not being inspired to observe yourself. But chopping wood and carrying water, metaphysically, those allegories of observing yourself and meditating on your egos and becoming a hermetically sealed vessel, carrying your water so that your water will be able to carry you as it carried Jesus. Chop wood and carry water. This allegory, even if you play video games, even if you play one of the most difficult video games series anybody's ever made, Dark Souls, the only place you can save the game in Dark Souls is at campsites. You have to light a campfire, or you have to find a campfire. It's a trope. It's an archetype, even in role-playing games, where you either go to town or the village or an inn or a camp and you light a fire, and that's when you rest and regroup. before you go out adventuring the next day. You chop wood, you carry water. You have to do this work on yourself to make yourself stronger for the next sortie, for the next time that you will be inspired. And that you need to be at your best. You need to be rested. You need to be rejuvenated. And if the next project you have to do is even more challenging than the last, then you will have to be that much sharper. You will have to have your gifts, your faculties will have to be that much more available. So you have to be a better you than you were the last time that you were inspired. Because the next enterprise, the next aspect of your life's work will be more challenging and will require even more of you than the last. So the answer to the question, right? What do you do when you're uninspired, when you feel like you're forsaken and abandoned? So you observe that. And if you're wandering the desert, you wander the desert. And you face the serpents that are biting at your heels. Because that shame, that guilt that starts cropping up, that says you're not good enough and that you're unworthy and that you've been abandoned and that you're not inspired anymore because clearly you didn't do a good job the last time, and all of that shame and guilt, that's the flip side of pride. So when I say that we can fall in love with the feeling of being inspired, and we can become very attached to being in flow state, is that whether we like it or not, the ego of pride is taking ownership of that. The I, the false self, is siphoning off of that flow state and saying, oh, I'm so spiritual. I'm so special. I'm so this. I'm so creative. I'm so whatever. That's why so many people on the internet talk about being in flow state without any mention whatsoever of spirituality or a higher self or anything else. It's all just them. It's all just I'm in flow state. Man, when I'm in flow state, it's just cooking. And I can't do wrong. I can do no wrong and everything's this and that, right? There's no humility. One of the advantages of being uninspired, of being lost in the desert, is that the desert teaches us humility real quick. Because we're this tiny little ant, this speck in this ocean of sand. Watch Lawrence of Arabia and appreciate that 70 millimeter widescreen long shots of the desert with Peter O'Toole, right? This tiny ant, this speck crawling across the screen. And you realize just how small you are and how insignificant you are. This isn't an opportunity to beat yourself up or to become ashamed. No, but to see the reality of the situation and to learn some humility, that it's not about you. It's not about me. A servant waits patiently until they are called upon. And when they are not called upon, when they are dismissed, what does a servant do? A servant attends to their duties and prepares themselves for the next day and remains in a state of preparedness. They prepare. What comes to mind is a book by Antonin Stanislavski. It's a mainstay of actors everywhere around the world. It's called An Actor Prepares. Now, actors are artists and they need inspiration most of the time, because not all actors are excellent improvisers, and even excellent improvisers call on the moment. They pick up cues while they're on stage to be or on screen to be able to improvise off the top of their head. But most actors rely on scripts and on guidance, on direction from their directors, and they rely on input and feedback from their fellow actors. They need inspiration, in other words. But long before an actor gets to rehearsal, or they get to, opening night or the set, they prepare. That's what Stanislavski was writing about in this book, how actors are to prepare to be able to be inspired, to be able to make the most of their inspiration when it comes. An actor has to prepare. We need to prepare for when inspiration comes. And how do we prepare? We chop wood. We carry water. We don't regress, but we become humble. And in the Alm of Life, because we are descending into hell, we're going back down again where we've been before, i.e., before enlightenment. Because enlightenment is a process. Enlightenment is not a destination. Enlightenment is not an on-off switch. Enlightenment, if you take the word at its literal linguistic construction, enlightenment means to lighten over time. Enlightenment is a process. If it were a destination, we would call it enlightened. Someone is enlightened, or they are not. But we talk about enlightenment. Just to clarify this for you, because not everybody is a linguist and not everybody cares for linguistics. But remember, language is spelling, language is magic. Just to make this absolutely clear that we're all on the same page and that you can use this okay? Let's take another word that you're probably familiar with. Do you see the similarity between enlightenment and entertainment? They are both structured the same way, but they have root words that can be close-ended. So, for example, someone who is enlightened, right? Someone who is entertained. The ending says everything. Entertainment is not, entertainment doesn't have an end. It is an activity. Entertainment is a process. It is a function, as is enlightenment. And if the function of entertainment is to entertain, then the function of enlightenment is to enlighten. But what does that mean? To enlighten? Well, it means to lighten. Or to lighten up. To lighten up means to apply more light to, or to reduce the weight of. That which is weighing us down, that which is heavy, that which is burdensome. And esoterically, metaphysically, when we talk about what we carry as a burden, we carry the consequences of our past errors, our past mistakes, our past transgressions against others. We call that karma. That is the burden that we carry. Like the wood that we carry on our back. But if we chop that wood and burn that wood, we reduce the burden. We've eliminated our karma. The burden of our karma are our egos. They are the substance, that heaviness that we carry. And it creates fire. It is consumed within fire and it creates fire. And that fire adds to the waters, our sexual waters, that we must carry because only it can carry us. Our Divine Mother, Devi Kundalini Shakti. You're familiar with the Christian poem, Footprints. The man's walking along the beach, looks back on his life, he sees two sets of footprints. And he asks God, he says, where's the, who put the other set of footprints there? And God says, that was me. I was walking beside you. And the man says, "Oh, that's wonderful." But then he takes a closer look, looking backwards on his life, and he notices that at times, the hardest times of his life, there was only one set of footprints. And he said, "God, why is it when I needed you the most, you abandoned me?" And he says, "No, no, 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 my son. Where you see one set of footprints is where I carried you." That poem is about the Divine Mother, our individual Divine Mother. She is, the second set of footprints are hers. She's the one who's always with us. She's giving us everything that we need, including all of our tests, trials, and ordeals. And sure enough, when we need it the most is when she carries us. That is the water, the sexual force, the creative fire. But that is the water we must carry, we must contain, we must preserve if we hope for it to carry us. So, as much as enlightenment is about light, I always like to add this second context about weight, about what we are carrying and the burden that we are carrying, and that we carry less water the more wood we're carrying. So we have to lighten up. We have to release ourselves from all of that burden. But the only way to do that is to comprehend, to learn our lesson, to learn the error of our ways. And we do that by chopping wood. There's an understanding, a comprehension, an analysis, a breaking down, a breaking apart into bite-sized portions, right? When you're chopping firewood, you know what I'm talking about. You're chopping big logs into smaller logs. This is the deeper esoteric meaning of these idioms that the average people, normal people, just don't get. They just think that it's just, oh yeah, yeah. So, for example, you can go on to YouTube and there's a Buddhist monk who has a whole series of videos where he talks about doing his chores in the monastery, and how doing his chores, how valuable it is to becoming enlightened, because it allows you to focus on where you are and doing what you're doing, and it's a waking meditation, and so on and so forth. And he goes on and on and on, all of these different Buddhist techniques and explanations and so on and so forth around just doing his chores. Well, of course, that's that level of understanding of chopping wood and carrying water. But he doesn't mention the deeper esoteric significance, the metaphysical esoteric significance of those analogies and those allegories. Because in the Buddhist tradition, those are still kept secret. Those are only for the initiated. They don't release that information publicly. So he's really only talking about the first part of chop wood, carry water, and even the second part. He's only talking about that surface level understanding of chop wood, carry water, the literal mundane level of that. And while sure, it can be valuable to think of it in those terms, and certainly to do your chores and to do what must be done and do physical labor and everything else, it has its place. But the more important work, the more significant work on the elm of life is the metaphysical meaning of chop wood and carry water, to prepare ourselves spiritually for the next round of inspiration. And as I said, that's why the archetype of the campsite in those role-playing games is that before you go into the next dungeon, before you face the next boss, before then you face the next deadly encounter in Dark Souls, you save your game and you apply your healing potions and all that kind of stuff at the campfire. You chop wood, you carry water. You rest, rejuvenate, you prepare. Like Stanislavski says of an actor prepares. We must be prepared. And you cannot prepare and be inspired at the same time. Right? You cannot train for a race and run the race at the same time. Again, I don't want to necessarily belabor the point with this sports analogy, but I mentioned it at the very beginning, how on the Joe Rogan experience with, and his guests were Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and they were talking about how it is so inspiring to see people achieving such high levels of self-actualization, to becoming the very best at what they do. But even they made the observation that such individuals are often very lonely, and they go through a lot of suffering, and they're never really truly happy in the strictest sense. They're doing what they love, but it's like they can't really enjoy it, because whatever level they get to, there's always another level. The point is, they made it very clear. Joe Rogan's area of expertise is martial arts, or like MMA, and so he knows a lot about boxing and so on. For the 5 minutes or so that an MMA fight goes, or the 10 minutes, 15 minutes that a boxing match goes, right? You don't see the 3-month training camp that led up to that. And you don't see the 6 months, the 9 months, the 10 months, the 12 months of training and devotion and dedication, the blood, sweat, and tears that the athlete puts into that 5-minute match. And in the case of the Olympics, it's even more extreme, because in the Olympics, you can have 100-yard dash, right? The 100 meters, it's over in what now? Like less than 8 seconds? And you don't see the 20 some odd years of devotion and dedication of these athletes. And it all culminates in 7.5 seconds, 8 seconds, and then it's over. What was he doing for those 20 years? He was preparing. They were preparing for that moment. Now you can say that, yeah, but they were being inspired, that they were inspired to do that. They were being driven, they were being called. Well, you are all here. You've been called. But rest assured, there are times when those athletes, they have to fight through whatever they have to fight through to get up at 5 a.m. in the dead of winter to get up and start their training regimen for the day. There's no 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year state of inspiration. No such thing. Unless you find the inspiration in the suffering, in the hardship, in the dark of night, in the dead of winter, lost in the desert. That too, when you realize, when you awaken, is part of the process of inspiration. It's called preparation. Then you can find the inspiration that's in the feeling of being uninspired. You can find the inspiration in the preparation. You inspire yourself to do the hard work, to get up out of bed 5 a.m. in the dead of winter, to go and train, or whatever it is that you are focused on in your life that you consider part of your life's work, that normally you find so inspiring when you're actually in it, but then when you're uninspired, when you have writer's block, when you don't have the imagination, when you don't have the intuition, but you can still chop wood and carry water. And can you find the inspiration in that, in working on yourself, in spending time with yourself, in spending time in the dungeons of your own shadow, wandering in the desert, patiently awaiting the next test, the trial, the ordeal, patiently awaiting the inspiration, patiently awaiting for the guidance of the star in the sky that's going to provide you the clear route to where you need to go and where you need to be, the person you need to become. But what can you do in the here and now to prepare yourself for when that happens? What can you do as a mortal, as a vessel? You can chop wood. You can carry water. Because if you chop wood and carry water, guess what? When you are called to carry the banner, the torch of your higher self, you'll have the muscles, the wherewithal to do so, because you have trained, because you have prepared. Just as Konstantin Stanislavski said, an actor must prepare. You don't just get to step out on stage and grab all the fame and the fortune and the adulation of the crowd. It's not how that works. There are very, very few one-take wonders in the world of cinema. It takes many hours of preparation, of character work, of memorizing your lines, and then of rehearsal in order to find the magic, find the moment that ultimately makes it on screen. And it takes many, many hours of preparation to make that happen. So, chop wood, carry water. There are many, many other analogies and examples that I could go through. You know, we could look at everything from fishing examples and high tide and low tide, and right. So the fishermen go out, I guess, when the tide is right, like the boats leave and they do their thing, and then they come back, and then low tide they have to be in like they can't do anything, so that's when they clean the fish. They take the fish to market. They do all the stuff that they need to do and have to do when the tide isn't right, when the tide has gone out. They can't go fishing. So what are they going to do? Well, they do all the other stuff that a fisherman has to do. And they fix nets. They do repairs on engines or on sails, and all the other equipment that they use, all these, and then but they also rest. They sleep. They recuperate. They rejuvenate. Right? They scrub barnacles off the hull of their boat. I mean, there's countless things that go into being a fisherman, and it's not all just being on the water fishing, right? High tide, low tide. There's being inspired, and then there's being uninspired. And what do you do when you're uninspired? You chop wood, you carry water. You do maintenance. And the maintenance that you do is on yourself. Because remember, for you to be inspired, you are an instrument. You are a vessel, you are a vehicle. And when you're being inspired, it's you're on. It's opening night. It's race day. It's high tide and the salmon are running. You have to be ready. You have to be there. You got to be sharp. You got to be prepared. Your vessel needs to be in tip-top shape. All of your equipment, everything, your vehicle for race day. Your mechanics have to gone over that vehicle 1,000 times. I don't know if you caught the movie F1 last year. Because that's a good film all around. It's a good movie all around, but it's an excellent movie to understand all of the preparation that goes into this ridiculously over-the-top, glamorous sport for, the wealthiest people in the world. But the tweaking, the preparation, the analysis, all of that work that happens before the race. And you also see the wisdom of maturity and humility versus the hot-headedness of the young, brash, egotistical mindset who just wants to be on all the time, right? And he has to be on social media all the time. He's on 24/7, right? Because he's a brand. He's working on his brand. He's working on his image. Whereas the wise old racer is working on the car, and he's working on his driving. He's working on his strategy and his tactics and his physical preparedness and his mental preparedness. We can't be on all the time. We can't be in flow state all the time. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that, this drought, being lost in the desert, can last years or seem like it's lasting years. But one has to understand and has to appreciate that inspiration only comes to those who are prepared to receive it. And if you're not chopping wood and you're not carrying water, you cannot advance to the next level. You cannot ascend to the next higher level until you defeat the demons at the level of hell that you're in, right? It's the alm of life, up and down, up and down. If you want to ascend on the spiral path of the alm of life, then you have to descend, but you gotta defeat the demons in that part of the dungeon before you can come back to town and then go around again until you can level up, right? You got to do what you got to do in order to level up. So if you don't chop wood, you don't carry water, don't be surprised that inspiration doesn't come. You can't just sit there, wanting inspiration or needing inspiration or saying, "Oh, but it's my oxygen." Yeah, it might be your oxygen, but guess what? You have to take the time to breathe out the carbon dioxide that's poisonous, that's poisoning you. Inspiration might be your oxygen, and you want to breathe it in, you want to breathe it in, you want to breathe it in, fine. But you have to respect the process, and you have to respect taking the time to breathe out the toxic byproducts of inspiration. And you know they're there if you feel abandoned, forsaken, and you start and anxious, suffering from anxiety and depression, and beating yourself up, and I'm not worthy, and I'm not good enough, or I'm this, or I've been abandoned. I'm, I must be deemed untrustworthy, or like on all of the other nonsense that your mind sits there mixing up. Well, the reason why that is because that's all the toxic side effects of when you're in the flow state, and when are being inspired and you are riding the wave. You're going, woohoo! I'm the greatest. I'm the king of the world. So that when you're uninspired and you're no longer in the flow state, that same pride that wants to own the flow state and own the inspiration, say, I'm special, I'm so special, I'm so great, I was chosen, I'm the chosen one. When you're uninspired, then it's like, oh, I'm terrible, I'm forsaken, I'm not worthy, right? Because shame is the flip side of pride. But if you can learn humility and you prepare yourself for inspiration with humility, you humble yourself. I'm nothing. I'm a vessel. I'm a servant. You learn patience and humility, and you work on you chop wood, you carry water. Then when inspiration does come, you won't let it go to your head. Then you will be really sharp. Then you will truly be in the flow state, because it won't be you in the flow state. It will be you as a conduit in a state of flow for the Christ to flow through you, for the Spirit to flow through you, to art here on earth as our Father who art in heaven. That's what it means to truly be in flow state. Not shooting the rapids like a superhero. No. Like being the river, being the pipe, the aqueduct, the conduit, and letting that flow through you, and giving the least resistance, and all of your gifts and all of your faculties, serving, gifting like the wise men do. And that's why in Formula One, you have this wise man and you have this young hothead. And the wise man doing everything he can, bringing all that he can to this singular endeavor. Does anybody have any questions or comments about what to do when you are feeling uninspired, and how to navigate this aspect of the path? Because we can't be on all the time, and we can't be in the flow state all the time. As much as it's oxygen to those of us on the path and to those creatives and so on, you need there needs to be an ebb and flow. You go to bed every night, you need your 6, 7, 8 hours sleep. You need to eat, you need to rest. You breathe in, you need to breathe out. Being uninspired is part of the process. It's part of being on the path. It's part of being an artist. It's part of being a writer. It's part of being anybody involved in anything. But if you have any questions or comments, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Address them, I guess. It's a better way to put it. Perhaps it's you want to ask something more detailed about this Buddhist expression. I don't know, whatever. I'll give you a moment to type. Let's put it that way. By the way, today's topic was inspired by my own uh, experience, my own suffering that I'm going through right now of being uninspired. And just, I don't want to bore you with the details, but I'm doing my best to take my own advice as I expressed it here today, and doing my best to be patient and doing my best to chop wood and carry water. I mean, and have faith that the inspiration that I'm in need of, that I will not be denied so long as I prepare myself. But that now is the time to prepare. And that includes, yesterday I handed the spare key over to the real estate agent because we have to prepare the house to put it on market. And we have probably less than a month to get everything ready. So I have a ton of work. I have a lot of, just practically speaking, I have a lot of wood to chop and a lot of water to carry just with the house. So it makes sense that I'd not be saddled with a whole, new project right here, right now. I mean, I already had to take a month off in December to do the move. And now it just makes sense that I have to finish up uh, the aspect of me having moved out. I've got a lot of responsibilities still in helping to prepare the house for market in order to be free of it once and for all, and that maybe inspiration won't really come until after all of that, and that completing and truly closing the chapter on that part of my life and getting that very tangible physical monkey off my back. Talk about enlightenment, lightening the load, right? And get all that responsibility, settled and taken care of and behind me. Maybe all of that, again, chopping wood and carrying water has to happen first. And to really well and truly prepare me and well and truly clean the slate. Because as it is, I moved into this new place and I've got a very strong sense of new beginnings and new possibilities, and then everything happening in on the world stage. It's like the clock is ticking. 2026 is here. Things are changing. Things are moving very rapidly. And it's like you get that sense of urgency. You get that sense of, okay, we got to get on with it. Yeah, but the inspiration isn't there to get on with it because maybe it's not time to get on with it. It's time to, put to bed the things that need to be put to bed before we can get on with it. Got to close the chapter and let's tie up loose ends, right? And so on. So I'm sharing all of this with you just here at the tail end, that that everything that I've expressed today, as I've said many times, I sound like a broken record. These live streams are as much for my benefit as they are for yours. And that no matter where we are on the path, we will face the same challenges over and over again, just at different levels with different intensities. And that each time we face them, because we're facing them with at a higher level and a deeper intensity, that we're going to face them anew. And they're going to have a different flavor. They're going to have a different circumstance around them. We're going to have to keep learning the same lesson over and over again at a higher level, at a deeper intensity. And that's the process of mastery. That's the only way to master something, right? You got to face the same challenge, but at a new level of challenge, right? So a master pianist, a master baker, a master sculptor, a master painter, a master anything. It's this ebb and flow. It's the alm of life, and inspiration and uninspiration, preparation. Okay, so nobody has asked any questions or left any comments. So I'm going to assume that either everybody is asleep or doing something else, or just for some reason everything's hit home and nobody has any questions or comments. So I want to thank you for spending a couple hours of your Sunday. Oh, there's one. Okay. Mutaga says, greetings, everyone. Lately, I was observing how quickly in a few days one can go from being fully aligned, feeling so charged up, to feeling low, unsure of the path. Yeah, we can definitely turn on a dime, and we can go from very high to very low, and like you said, very aligned, very inspired, very in the flow, to feeling like we're out in the cold, abandoned, forsaken. And because the revolutions of the alm of life can happen very quickly, so it's not as straightforward as a simple spiral that we draw. Just know that you are never handed we are never handed more than we are capable of handling. So even if you are feeling low, even if you are feeling unsure of the path, just observe that. Just be in observation, be present, and as I express, like being lost in the desert is part of the journey. And Mutaga adds, he says, and always I was stuck in a pattern. Whenever I was low, the egos are louder, and that's when it is hard to resist the many vices. Well, yes, because they're opportunists. And remember, when on the alm of life, when you descend into hell, remember you're on their territory, right? You're on their turf. Your subconscious mind, psychological hell, that's their home, right? That's where they thrive, right? So you, as a hero in the video game, in the role-playing game, in Dungeons and Dragons or Diablo, and you're going down into the dungeon to fight the demons, well, that's their home. You're crashing where they live. So yeah, all the traps, all the secret passageways, all the pitfalls, all of the cracks and crevices and corners where they're all hiding and just waiting to ambush you, it's their turf. Just think about in Lord of the Rings and Fellowship of the Ring, when they go into the mines of Moria. It used to be the home of the dwarves, but it was taken over by goblins and orcs and the ancient demon of the deep, the the Balrog. And so by the time the Fellowship arrived there, those great halls of the dwarves, that tremendous architecture, underground architecture of Moria, that's been taken over by the forces of darkness. Now so you're on their turf now, and they're opportunists, right? And yeah, that's when they're emboldened. They can be as loud as they want, and they can be as threatening and as tempting. And it's very hard to resist them when they're on their turf, when they're so empowered, when they're so emboldened. But that's the whole point, right? That's the whole archetype of these heroes descending into the dungeon, descending into the darkness, to battle the corruption, to battle the demons, to face the darkness. That's the whole game. That's why role-playing games, that's why Lord of the Rings, that's why these archetypal stories, even going back into Greek mythology of Perseus descending into the labyrinth and into the underworld, into the labyrinth to fight Medusa, and Theseus doing the same to fight the Minotaur. They have endured for thousands of years because it's an archetypal truth. This is the game. This is the process that we have to undertake within ourselves, right? Chopping wood and carrying water, if it helps you to visualize it that way, right? Visualize Aragorn, right? And Legolas and Gimli, fighting the goblins and the trolls in Moria and chopping them left and right with their swords, right? You're chopping wood. You're cutting out the dead wood. You're cutting out the dark denizens who have taken over these once mighty great halls, and of course the great singular archetype, the singular embodiment of the amalgamation of all of that darkness is the tremendous demon of the deep, the Balrog, the ancient darkness that truly only Gandalf can face. And Gandalf is archetypally, he is the allegorical representation of our innermost being. Truly, only our innermost intimate Christ can defeat the Balrog. And in doing so, right, if you recall the beginning of in the Two Towers, Gandalf the Grey defeats the Balrog, the deepest dungeons of the highest peak, and I smote my adversary, and then he said, life left me, and Gandalf undergoes a transformation. He dies when he defeats the Balrog. Gandalf dies because the Balrog and Gandalf are one. And Gandalf the Grey dies, and he returns Gandalf the White, a Christified master, a resurrected one. Any other questions or comments before we call it a day? Well, if there aren't any more questions or comments, I'll give you maybe a couple more seconds to type if you're trying to get it one out. There's not really much else to report. There's plenty of stuff happening in the world. I would encourage you to just keep an ear to the ground and stay abreast in general. You want to keep on top of things. Don't let anything, really catch you by surprise unnecessarily. There's lots of movement happening geopolitically around the world, and probably also in your country, wherever you are. So Mutaga says, for now, I felt the voice say, sacrifice these vices to the higher self. Let them pass, and it is not easy at all. I don't know if it's universal, but whenever low, demons tempt with any type of dopamine. Yes, they do. It is universal. It is universal. When you're weak, when you're low energy, when you're vulnerable, that's when they pounce, because egos are terrorists, especially fear. But they're all terrorists. They're opportunists. All parasites are opportunists, right? That's what a parasite is. They look for an opening and they take it. And Mutaga says, yeah, and they hit whether with food, sex, drugs, alcohol, you name it. Could be gambling, could be video games, binging Netflix, just basic procrastination, laziness. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. And yeah, there's no end to how they can tempt us. And not only that, they won't only tempt us, they'll very often come with rationalizations and validations and explanations. And those rationalizations, we tell ourselves, oh, well, I've earned it. Oh, just this once, or just this little, or, they're very, very, very clever, and they're very, very, very subtle. And so but observe it. There's no point in, rolling your eyes and, or was a woe is me or whatever. You can't, don't allow yourself to become a victim of it. Just observe it. This is the game. This is the game. This is the path. This is the way. And rather than lamenting it, embrace it, recognize it, embrace it, and say, okay, all right, this is the next round. So I've got to observe this lust or this gluttony or this pride or this fear or this laziness. Observe it, meditate on it, comprehend it, do my best to analyze and understand how it is causing me suffering and how it's causing other people suffering. Chop wood, carry water. Because the more you know yourself, the more you embrace your shadow, that false self, what you are integrating there is that is your adversary. That is what is making you better, by you recognizing this, right? By you recognizing all the ways that your adversary tempts you with all these parasites, these psychological aggregates, these mind viruses, these egos. That's what's making you a better person, because you have to be challenged. If you're not challenged, there's no challenge, there's no way to improve. It's impossible. You can't improve without challenging, without facing your limits. Impossible. Mutaga says, it's very challenging, I must admit. Yes, they are king of rationalization, and they even push like terrorists, make you feel as if you have no option but to cave in. Exactly. Because they are mechanical. They are the forces of determinism. Remember that. They're mechanical. They're algorithms. They're like computer viruses that are trying to take over your system. And they'll do anything and say anything to get you to relinquish control of your system, just like a real computer virus does. A real computer virus will tempt the user with anything and everything, right? Free this, free that, free download, beautiful images, awesome video, a free game, like just unlimited promises of all kinds of stuff, right? Clickbait ads and all kinds of nonsense. You've been on the internet. You know what I'm talking about. And if you make the mistake of double clicking the link or opening the file or opening the image, right? Because you buy into the bullshit, right? You buy into the sales pitch, into the promise, into the temptation of whatever it is that they're offering or whatever it is that they're promising. Bingo. It's like you're giving permission to that computer virus to then take control of your system. And what does it do? Immediately, it starts to exploit and hog system resources in exactly the same way that your egos want to exploit your human resources, consciousness and sexual energy. And they will say and do anything under the sun to get you to give in. So just observe it and say, okay, thank you for the suggestion. I'll take it under advisement. Mutaga says, thanks, Attlas. Your preaching today, as always, is very apropos. Well, you're more than welcome, Mutaga. I'm glad you found it useful. I'm glad you found it helpful. Now, here's one thing I will say, okay? Never forget the archetype of Steppenwolf, which is walking with the wolf. Okay? When you're walking with the wolf, every now and then you have to throw the wolf a bone. Okay? If you don't throw the wolf a bone, the wolf will make a meal out of you. Now, what do I mean by this? There is a way, okay, when you are being tempted with all kinds of, what you were saying, dopamine, and so the demons are tempting you with all kinds of stuff that you shouldn't have. If you know yourself, if you understand and comprehend the nature of the demon that you're dealing with, and it's a demon that you live with, and there's no point in denying it, but if you completely cut it off of everything, if you deny yourself everything all the time, it's like that wolf will start starving and will start to get desperate and will make a meal out of you. Sooner or later, it will get the best of you, and then you will fall hard. So when it comes to things like food, give yourself a so-called treat every now and then. The reason why you do this is because it's better to have a little bit on a regular basis than it is to deny yourself completely and then binge like a madman once in a while. I'm speaking from experience, especially when it comes to food. So especially when it comes to food, if you feed yourself, for example, everybody is crazy about, carbohydrates, and it's like no carb and low carb and this and that and the other thing. It turns out that if you're on a low carb diet or a carnivore diet or a keto diet, you're essentially starving yourself. You're putting your body into its starvation mode, and you're denying your whole metabolism its preferred fuel source, which is carbohydrate. And so sooner or later, you're going to hit a plateau in terms of your weight loss or weight management and everything else. Your blood sugar markers are going to start going up. Your insulin resistance is going to start going up, and you'll probably find yourself having issues with binging on food, because your body is going to be in such a state um, of withdrawal, right? Of being denied what it needs, what it prefers as a fuel source, that you'll have these ridiculous cravings for carbs and for sugar and for all, and then when you're depressed, when you're anxious, when you're lonely, when you're emotionally down, carbs of course are comfort food. But if you're haven't been eating carbs and you've been denying yourself, then those urges to binge, those cravings will come with such a vengeance. And this can happen across the board with many, many, many different things. So there are exceptions to this rule, but you need to, there are many, many resources available to you to find how to manage better. So for example, alcohol and sex, right? You don't want to indulge in fornication, but you can use pranayama, and you can use the Myroli mudra and the transmutation of the sexual force to take the edge off of that. It's called scientific chastity. And when it comes to alcohol, you now have available to you a huge choice of non-alcoholic drinks. So the other day, I had a non-alcoholic Guinness. I was a beer drinker in my younger days, and I only drank like craft beer and stuff. And I can tell you that the non-alcoholic Guinness is 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 every bit as good as regular Guinness. So you can get non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic champagne for celebrations. There are many ways that we can find little tricks, little ways to throw the wolf a bone, and ways to, treat yourself. So don't go and buy the bag of potato chips or tortillas that are fried in canola oil or seed oil, right? Go and get some healthy rice cakes that made with puffed rice, and that there's no seed oils in them. And you can if you want something to munch on or snack on, like, there are healthy options, and you can make your own stuff, right? There are a million recipes on the internet and on YouTube. And part of the process of making it is part of the process of, you can make a little ritual out of it so that you're treating yourself, and it's a ritual for treating yourself. So they have this expression, everything in moderation, right? So just a little bit, just, throw the wolf a bone, and he won't devour you whole. Mutaga says that's 100% accurate. It is better to eat a pizza than binge watching pornography, but even then we have to be careful. It can be a slippery slope. Okay, now this is true, absolutely true, right? So but this is why self-observation and self-knowledge is so important. Only you can know where to draw the line, and where the parameter is how far you can go. And remember, because it's the Alm of Life, each time you say, okay, I'm going to go a little bit longer without having junk food. Last week I went 2 days in between having a little bit of junk food or having a little bit of chocolate or having a little bit of whatever. This week, I'm going to go 3 days, because every time we do this, if you treat it as part of your spiritual practice, you make it part of your fast. You can combine it with fasting. So you can go on what they call a dopamine fast. That you can fast more than just food. You can fast internet. You can fast social media. You can fast anything. So again, if you incorporate this into your chop wood, carry water, and recognize that this is preparing you and making you stronger, you become more comfortable and more attuned with, more capable of, chopping more wood and carrying more water. It's like you're conditioning yourself, just like you would condition yourself in, swimming laps in the Olympic pool, or running, jogging, or running around the track. You're conditioning your body, you're conditioning your heart, your cardiovascular system. Or you go to the gym or you're lifting weights, you're conditioning your muscles. Well, you can condition yourself in many, many, many different ways, including all of these habits and these appetites, right? That are ways in which our egos tempt us. We can, we can learn new habits. We can form new pathways. We can, and as I said, we can manage these appetites, right? Any other comments or questions? I want to thank you all for being here once again, spending a couple hours on your Sunday. And I want to wish everyone a good week. Have a great week, in fact. And if you are currently in a state of being inspired, then by all means, be in the flow and be in alignment and enjoy the feeling of having that come through you, such that you art here on earth as your Father in heaven. But if you're not inspired right now, take heart, chop wood, carry water, take to heart everything that I've talked about today, and that you're not alone, that I'm right there with you, but that look at the bright side. Look, even this live stream was born out of that fact that I'm at present uninspired. And even in this uninspired state, I can take and transmute a state of uninspiration into a 2.5 hour live stream filled with truths and practical knowledge that you can apply in your own path and your own journey. Right? We all have to be prepared. We can't breathe in without breathing out. And although inspiration to all of us is like oxygen, yes, absolutely. But we mustn't neglect expulsion of the carbon dioxide. We must always remember that we need to chop wood and carry water and work on expelling that which is toxic within us, that which is burdening us, in order so that we may further ourselves along this process of enlightenment. All right. I will leave it there. Take care. Have a wonderful week. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Until then, as always, whoops, my microphone's in the way. Inferential peace. Take care, everyone.